Hi guys, it's Angie with Fun Endeavors Tie-Dye Lab. Today let's make a reverse dyed shirt, and this shirt I'm going to do in a diagonal double fan fold. The shirt I'm using is a Gildan Ultra Cotton shirt, but it's kind of like a periwinkle type color. I'm starting by grabbing one corner of the hem of the shirt and folding it just a little bit past the opposite shoulder of the shirt. I used a straight edge to find the center of where the corner of the shirt crossed over the shoulder of the shirt. Using a washable marker, I made a mark there, and then I took an old piece of sinew and wrapped it around the washable marker, placed one end of the piece of sinew on the mark that I just drew on the shirt, and using the washable marker, I made an arc on the shirt. This is the line that I'm going to fan fold. Once I have this line fan folded, I'm going to tie it with some sinew. Sinew has a wax coating on it, and so wherever I tie one of these sinew lines and I pull it really tightly until it locks down on itself, the sinew is going to cause a barrier which won't allow the liquid underneath this line. So after the color removal process and after the dyeing, this line ought to remain this periwinkle color. After I've tied the initial line, I'm going to fan fold and tie more lines on either side of this initial line. Every place that I tie a sinew line, that part is going to remain the original color of the shirt. So as I'm getting closer to what is the center of the fan fold, I'm making my lines closer together. And then when I add sinew lines to the other side of the initial fan fold, or the initial line that I tied, I'm going to spread my lines out just a little bit to make those further apart. I just think it's kind of a fun effect sometimes if all the lines aren't exactly the same distance. For the color removal process, I'm going to use a product called OWB Brite, and it's not a bleach product, so it's not going to have to be neutralized and it won't damage the fabric. But I do have to have boiling water to make it work. So I have a couple pots of boiling hot water on top of my stove right now, and they're ready to go. I'm going to begin by placing all the items that I'm going to remove the color from inside of a container together. And I'm doing this process outside because OWB Brite does have a smell, and I don't really want that smell inside of my dye space. I'm also wearing my respirator while I do this project because I don't want to inhale any of the OWB Brite powder. I'm going to sprinkle some OWB Brite over the top of all the shirts, and then I'm going to pour a pot of boiling hot water over the top. If you'll notice, just as soon as the hot water hits the OWB Brite, it starts to foam and immediately remove the color from the shirts. A few of these shirts in here are a little bit wacky, so like the blue shirt, it is not removing the color from that one. But this shirt, I was kind of surprised because this periwinkle is very blue, so I wasn't sure it would remove the color from this shirt, but it did really well. By the way, this shirt is right in the middle of the container. It's in between the blue shirt above and the black shirt down below. Before I added the second pot of boiling hot water, I added just a little bit more of the dry OWB Brite to the top of the shirts. Then I poured in the second pot of boiling hot water. I took a pair of metal tongs and I kind of moved all the shirts around to make sure they were fully submerged, to make sure I turned them over so both sides got well saturated. And then as I felt like the items had the color removed or were as good as it was going to get, I took them out one by one and I took them to my utility sink and rinsed them in really cold water and then placed them in my washing machine. When all the shirts were rinsed, I started my washing machine on a cold water cycle along with a little bit of Dharma's Professional Textile Detergent. After the shirts were washed, I placed them down inside of my soda ash solution and allowed them to soak. And by the way, I've left them tied for this entire process. I did not untie the shirts at all. Then after I let the shirts soak in the soda ash solution for a while, I went ahead and spun them out in my Panda spin dryer and placed them aside to allow them to dry. Which, by the way, a lot of times anything that you have removed the color from is going to bleed a little bit of color and possibly some smell into your soda ash solution. So I normally like to discard my soda ash solution after I use it to do reverse dyed items. For this shirt, I've chosen some Dyespin colors. A couple of them are some Dark Horse dyes, then just one regular dye color, but it has some really pretty splits. For my setup, I'm placing the shirt down inside of a piece of vinyl guttering. I'm going to tie a piece of kite string around the end of the shirt, and then I'm going to attach the other end of the kite string to the piece of guttering with a metal clip. I'm doing this so that when I incline this shirt, it won't slide out of the guttering. Which, by the way, you don't have to incline this shirt. I just normally incline this design, so I was kind of on autopilot. But if I was going to do it again, I would not incline it. And the reason for that is because I have all of the sinew lines in the shirt. The dye is not going to flow down the shirt the way it normally does for just a shirt tied with kite string. So if you want to just place your shirt inside of the piece of vinyl guttering and leave it alone, leave it flat on your table, apply the dye and the ice, that'll work great too. Because the shirt is completely dry, I am applying a little bit of soda ash solution that I have in a squirt bottle over the top, just so that the dye is going to stick a little bit better. Then I'm applying one color of dye to each one of the sections. I'm starting with Moody Blue, which is a Dark Horse color from Dyespin, followed by Cosmic, and then the other Dark Horse dye is Purple Twilight. So I'm going to apply Moody Blue, skip a couple sections, and apply some more, and continue that all the way down the shirt. Then I'm going to come in and fill in the other sections with the other two colors. Now I'm going to add an additional sprinkle of dry soda ash over the top of the dye and add on a layer of ice. To incline the shirt, I'm going to take a plastic tote, place one end of the vinyl guttering down inside of the tote, and leave the other end hanging over the edge. That's going to place the shirt at an incline. Once the first layer of ice melted, I came back and checked the shirt, and I had quite a bit of undissolved dye left on top, so I went ahead and added a second layer of ice. Then after the second layer of ice melted, I took the piece of vinyl guttering, placed it down inside of a plastic tote that has a metal rack down in the bottom, placed the lid on the tote, and put the shirt outside to process. That allows it to process in the heat without drying out. I left the shirt for about 48 hours before I began rinsing it. To rinse the shirt, I took it to my utility sink and I began rinsing it in cold water to rinse out the soda ash. Then I warmed the water up to hot, and I continued rinsing in hot water to rinse out the excess dye that didn't bond with the fabric. At some point, I untied the shirt, and then instead of rinsing in hot for a long time, I decided to soak the shirt. And to do that, I placed some really hot water in my utility sink, added a little bit of Blue Dawn dish soap to the water, placed the shirt inside, and just allowed it to soak. When the water cooled off, I changed it out, and I continued that soaking process until my water was remaining almost clear. Then I put the shirt into my washing machine along with some Dharma's professional textile detergent, and I washed it using a hot water cycle. Okay, so the shirt's been washed, dried, and ironed, and let's see what it looks like. Okay, so what do you guys think? I think this one looks really cool, but I can't see a huge difference between the colors that I put on the shirt. Love the design. You know, these reverse dyes are always fun to unwrap because I have no idea how much color was removed, what it's going to look like, anything, because it's been tied for so long. I've started marking mine now because in the past I haven't marked them, and sometimes I forget what the design actually is when I go to apply the dye. But I love the shirt except for the fact that there's not a huge amount of difference between the 3 different purpley blue colors that I used. So it honestly looks almost like I just used one color. I mean, there is shade differences and you can see depth to the shirt because the 3 colors were obviously not the same, but it is not as big of an impact as I was hoping for. I do think that the purple colors look really good with that periwinkle shirt color. I think that's pretty. And I love the fact that all the lines are not the same distance apart. I like that the lines are really close together at the very corner and up on the shoulder, and then they get bigger as you get closer into the center of the shirt. And I think that's just pretty interesting to look at. I like that. So overall, I really like the shirt, even though the color difference doesn't have the impact I was wanting. I really do love it. But what do you guys think? Please drop me some comments down below and let me know. And if you've enjoyed the video, I sure would appreciate it if you would like it and if you'd subscribe to my YouTube channel. If you'll hit the bell, you'll receive a notification whenever I upload a new video. Thank you all for watching, and I hope you have a great day.